Hi, I'm Lila Sinnott, and today I'm going to be talking about Milkshake Duck and how that relates to Belle Gibson's story. So, the phrase milkshake duck comes from a viral tweet that you can see on the screen here from journalist Ben Ward that jokes about the internet loving a duck that drinks milkshakes before immediately discovering 5 seconds later that the duck is actually racist. The joke describes a common pattern we see online, which is internet fame, negative discovery, and then public backlash. So, several concepts in media psychology help to explain why this happens. First is parasocial relationships, which is emotional attachment to celebrities who one does not know. Context collapse, which is when several audiences all see the same communication at the same time. Cancel culture, which is when online audiences collectively shame or reject public figures due to controversy. Negativity bias, which is when people are more likely to remember negative information than positive. De-individuation, which is the tendency for people to break more rules or behave negatively when they do not think they're being observed. And lastly, splitting, which is assuming things or people are all good or all bad with no in between. In addition to understanding those terms, it's important to understand who Belle Gibson was before the scandal to understand her story as a whole. So, she was a successful Australian wellness influencer, and she claimed she had terminal brain cancer and said she healed herself naturally through her diet and alternative medicine instead of medical treatment. Her story spread obviously very rapidly because not only did it fit perfectly into online wellness culture at the time, but it was also just crazy to think that somebody would have been able to heal something like cancer without actual medical treatment. Her story um, built her a large Instagram following. She ended up releasing a wellness app and published a cookbook. A major reason people trusted her so much was the way that she presented herself online. As you can see here, her social media looked personal and aesthetic and authentic. Followers saw her as relatable rather than super celebrity-like, which made her advice feel even more trustworthy. Her popularity as a whole heavily depended on the fact that audiences believed her very personal story. Eventually, though, journalists began investigating her grand claims and found major inconsistencies. There was no medical evidence that she had ever had cancer, and questions also emerged about charitable donations that she claimed to have made. Once this information became public, backlash spread quickly online. This is a strong example of context collapse because millions of people were suddenly exposed to the same controversy simultaneously. The internet rapidly transformed Belle Gibson from an inspiration in the wellness community to a symbol of deception. You can see this book came out about her called The Woman Who Fooled the World, shows on Netflix, all sorts of headlines, and people labeling her as horrible things like a con artist, a psychopath. And as backlash intensified, you can see in this clip, she was asked outright if she thought that she was a pathological liar.
Would you accept that you're a pathological liar? No.
The moment shows how dramatically her image had changed online. Earlier audiences viewed her as inspirational, but now people, rightfully so, reduced her identity entirely to dishonesty and manipulation. So, several psychological mechanisms help to explain why audiences reacted so strongly to her story. First is parasocial relationships because they made followers feel emotionally connected to Belle Gibson's story in the first place. So many people experienced her deception as feeling like a personal betrayal. Second, negativity bias caused audiences to focus much more intensely on the scandal than the previous positive image she had built. Third, de-individuation made online backlash more extreme and harsh because social media allows people to react as part of a crowd, which reduces feelings of personal responsibility. And then finally, the idea of splitting also relates because it led people to, as a result of the negative discovery, view her as entirely evil, failing to recognize her complexity as a human who can be good and bad. So, together, these mechanisms intensified public outrage and cancel culture because once people discovered she had lied about having cancer, large online audiences collectively rejected and publicly condemned her across social media. So her story reveals larger problems with internet culture, which is that social media rewards emotional and inspiring stories before verifying that they are true. Influencers can gain public trust very quickly if they merely appear authentic online, regardless of if they actually are or not. And Belle Gibson's story is not unique. Public figures like Shane Dawson, James Charles, Lizzo, Elizabeth Holmes, and Carson King, like we talked about in class, have all experienced similar cycles of rapid admiration followed by backlash. Internet fame is unstable because online audiences are constantly reevaluating public figures. So, in my opinion, Belle Gibson is a strong example of a milkshake duck because she was an ordinary person who became extremely famous extremely quickly, and it was through a story that audiences found emotional and inspiring. But once people discovered her claims were fake, admiration turned into widespread criticism almost immediately. And today, rightfully so, in my opinion, most people primarily remember her for her deception rather than the inspiration that she was prior to the discovery. And that's it. Thank you.